Lance, thanks for joining us. We're here to talk about, obviously, The Wire and its Blu-ray re-release. I mean, the majority of your work before The Wire, you was a police officer or some type of that. Were you worried about being offered the role and getting typecast as Cedric Daniels?
Actually, the majority of my work before The Wire was not as a police officer. It wasn't until after Cedric Daniels that even after being cast as Cedric Daniels, I wasn't really worried about it because I'd done so much other character stuff before that. I mean, on Oz, I was a police officer, but I was an undercover cop in prison, playing a Jamaican. You know, before that, I was on the corner. I played, you know, a crackhead. As a matter of fact, because of my role in the corner, I was second choice for Bubbles when I auditioned for The Wire. So, you know, I go back and forth about the whole cop thing because it wasn't until Fringe that I really started being concerned about that.
Sure. I mean, you initially auditioned for Bunk, that's right, isn't it? And then you went...
Yeah, that was initially I auditioned for Bunk. I had 3 auditions for Bunk. Yeah.
Right, okay. And, I mean, did they tell you how close you were? Was it just you and, obviously, Wendell in a room at one point?
No, I mean, later, after Wendell and I became friends, he said, I can't remember if he was just offered the role, but he might have been. But no, initially I went in for the casting director, and then I went in for... Shoot, I can't remember what my second audition was for.
Did you go for Bubbles? Is that what I read right?
No. What happened was, in my third audition for Bubbles, David Simon and Ed Burns were in the room, and David and Ed knew me from the corner because I played Marvin in the corner, who was a crackhead, and so from after my third audition for Bunk, David basically asked me to read Bubbles on the spot. So they gave me some sides. I went outside for a few minutes, prepared, and then came back and read Bubbles. And Clark Johnson, that's what it was. My second audition was just for Clark Johnson and the casting director. And then the producers went on my third audition for Bunk. But initially, they wouldn't even see me for Daniels.
Right, so what did they say to you then? Did they say, right, we're not sure about Bunk, why don't you try Bubbles? We definitely don't want you for Daniels. I mean, what was the process? Was it Clark Johnson who told you? David Simon?
Nobody never really ever said, I mean, because they never say to you, we don't want to see you for a role. Your agents have to tell you that stuff. So they were looking for names for that role, for Daniels. And it was 2 weeks after that third audition that I called to check in for my agent. And they said, well, you're second choice for Bubbles, and if the other guy doesn't take it. And, of course, we know now that he did. Andre. It's funny, Andre and I, just seems like we're always up for like the same roles, even though we're completely different types. The same thing happened for Hand of God, the role that he just got in the new Amazon show that's shooting right now. Anyway, so I guess it was 2 or 3 weeks later they called me in for Daniels out of the blue, which ironically was the only role that I thought I was right for. And so, or at least that's what my agent thought I was right for. Honestly, when I read the pilot, I couldn't tell who I was right for because there were so many characters. The only character that I could tell was a major character was McNulty. The pilot was so dense. And so, it's funny because when I went in for my audition for Daniels, somehow because back then they were still giving me faxes. So somehow I hadn't gotten a third scene that I was supposed to prepare, which was a big monologue. So when I went in for my audition, did the 2 scenes that I prepared. It was just for the casting director. Then she said, okay, let's do the third scene. I said, what are you talking about? She said, this is this third scene with a monologue. I said, I never got that. She said, oh, well, here it is. And she handed it to me. She said, well, go out and look at it and then come back. I was like, oh, jeez. So I went out into the waiting room. I looked at it for a few minutes, marked it up, then went back in and did it. And then once again, I was waiting around for 2 weeks. And then, I called my agent maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later, and he said they passed on you for Daniels. They're looking for, they're looking for names. And then he ran down a list of names that didn't get it to make me feel better. And I was like, whatever, So I'd forgotten about it. And so it's gone on maybe a month later now. I was on the set of 100 Center Street. I was so lucky to be working with Sidney Lumet. But anyway, I was playing this like this black Muslim rabble rouser around this case, and it's funny. I remember being at lunch, and I was talking to somebody at lunch, and they were talking about my career in Oz, and he was saying, "Man, you better get your stuff together," because I was going through a separation with my wife. He said, "Man, you better get your stuff together because you're gonna hit." I said, "Yeah, people say that stuff all the time, right?" So at the end of the day, I was getting ready to go to take a train to go visit this high school that we were trying to get my daughter into, and I get a page from my agent. So I find a payphone. I call my agent. I said, "Steve, what's up? I gotta get on the train." He said, "The Wire, you got it." I said, "What?" I said, "Which role?" He said, "Daniels." And it was the first time in my life that something happened and I really wondered if I was dreaming.
Wow, I mean, that's amazing. So, before obviously going onto the set and starting filming, did David Simon give you any notes about Daniels? Did he say, look, he needs to be this uptight, or he needs to be like this? Or was it all coming from you and saying to David Simon and the writers, look, I think he should go this way?
No, it was a combination of things. First of all, not before we started shooting, but while we were shooting the pilot, one day at lunch, David, and this is before we really got into it, so it was very early on in the process. David took me aside at lunch one day, and he said, I'm trying to talk to all the leads about the characters. He said, this Daniels is based on these two guys, and then he described the two guys. And he said, I have a 60-episode story arc planned, and I'm planning your character is going to be here by the end of the 5th season. I said, okay, wow, great. The other thing he said was that they put me in touch with the police, because Ed Burns had a lot of friends still on the Baltimore City police force. And so all the cast that were cops did ride-arounds with people in the police department. And I got to spend a couple days with a lieutenant. And that was very, very, very illuminating. He said a few things to me that were really that were great. One was just about his take on the job. First of all, he said, he tried to deal with his people like his children. So caring but firm. If somebody's out of line, you really give it to them, but you always back them up. And he said, I whenever I can, not always, but I every once in a while, I like to go on raids with my guys and be the first one through the door so they don't think that I'm leading from behind. And the third thing he said to me, there were 4 things. Another thing that he told me, and then I talked to David about this later, was that he was going to school at night to get his MBA at Johns Hopkins. And David said that when a lot of cops reach the level of a lieutenant, if they want to move up in rank, they go to get a second degree, because it helps. And the last thing he told me was a story about a guy who was a dirty cop, and they went to get the guy at his house. And he was the first guy into the guy's room, and the guy was in his bed, and the guy just instinctively, he went to reach into his dresser for his gun, and he said, "Please do it, because I would love nothing more than to blow you away." He said, "I fucking hate dirty cops. I fucking hate dirty cops." And I was like, wow, that's... I was like, wow, that's the essence of cop. Yeah.
I mean, wow, that's Serpico, really.
I mean, I believe him, but the thing about it is, it was the whole notion that out on the street, when push comes to shove with confrontation, I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. It's thug against thug. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? In terms of, when the warrior, and I realized that I had to understand and get into that, inside of that mentality, no matter how much I was behind the desk. That always had to be, that thing always had to be able to click on when I needed it.
Wow. I mean, Go over 13 years ago now, really, when obviously you shot the pilot. I mean, what's your remembrance of the first day on set?
It's funny, you know, I don't remember any. The only thing I remember about the first day on set was looking at the call sheet and being shocked that I was the second lead, because I didn't even know that I was the second lead of the show until I saw it on the call sheet my first day at work.
Wow,
I had no idea how big Daniel's role was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, so did it just go by in a quick blur for you, those first few days of shooting?
The other thing I don't remember. The other thing I remember about the pilot was being nervous. Because I knew it was a big break. Like, this was a big deal. HBO was just starting to blow up. I mean, The Sopranos and Sex in the City and 6 Feet Under were already on the air. I think they'd all already finished their first seasons. And The Sopranos was like the first time that I can think of in the history of television where stars of a series had the same kind of prestige as movie stars. So I knew that, you know, I was part of something big. So I was nervous. And it wasn't until the second episode that I felt like I relaxed into the character. Now, fortunately for me, in retrospect, I feel like it worked for the character. But yeah, I felt like I was a little stiff in that first episode. It was because I was scared.
I mean, that's understandable. I mean, what I wanted to say was also, Cedric Daniels is in charge of kind of a ragtag bunch of people, really. I mean, when you were first...
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
When you were first reading, you know, the lines and everything, who did you think they're going to be a real pain in my arse, really?
Well, McNulty was obvious from the pilot. That was obvious. Because in the first scene after the team's together, just outside my office in the narcotics division before we got our own separate digs for the team, McNulty was Dick. So yeah, but nobody else I couldn't tell anybody else. Did
you have fun chewing out Dominic West throughout most of those seasons, you know, giving it to him?
Dominic's a great actor. I mean, there's no other way to put it. So it was just all our scenes always popped. But I thought, you know, I say that, but then I feel like I have to say, I feel like that way about almost all my scenes with everybody. I mean, that's maybe, I don't want to say it's the best cast I've ever worked with, but it's up there. Yeah. I mean, Oz was pretty great, and the cast I'm in now with Bosch, that's a hot cast. Yeah. So, yeah.
Who was the first one you kind of went to after you finished your scene? You went to and you went, was that any good? What did you think? You know, sort of friends-wise in the cast.
Oh, I never do that with cast members. I mean, maybe a little more now, but I mean, at the time, I just generally took my own counsel. Either it felt right or it didn't. And if it didn't, then it's funny, I'm notorious for always wanting another take. Particularly directors that know me and then we worked together, you know, a number of times over the years, they just know that about me.
So you look back over those 5 seasons now, and how do you think Daniels progressed? I mean, did you think he did a good job over that time? I mean, what do you think? Because obviously you, as you said, you rode around with police and things like that. Do you think he would have been capable of continuing that job?
No, not given who he was. He reached it because, I mean, I feel that the progression of the character was that this is so shit. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
This is so, this sounds like such a corny thing to say, but I feel like he grew spiritually. Like he grew up. And so he reached a point beyond which he not only would not, but could not compromise his sense of integrity. And this is what police work is, and this is what it isn't. And I'm only willing to do it for this way. And, you know, it's interesting because given how rampant the war on drugs has gotten, and how it's really become, in my opinion, a war on poor people, mostly of color. Because doing it, we're not seeing all these, raids every day in frat houses. Do you know what I mean? I just think that at a certain level, police, when I say a certain level, I mean a certain level up at the top of the chain of command, it becomes intertwined in politics. And a lot of politics is about politicians trying to get votes and keep their jobs. And so it's about showing things that they think the general public can, how do I put this? It's it becomes a show and tell game. So I'll show you these numbers to prove that I'm doing the things that make you feel safe. And so, a bunch of arrests for, as David Simon said in his interview with Barack Obama recently, real police work takes time. Are you going to spend, if you can get a bunch of numbers running in the streets and just rousting a bunch of guys on the street that they're going to be a high percentage of getting drugs, and you can get a whole bunch of numbers, or you're going to spend a month or however many weeks working a murder case or robbery case? You're going to go for the numbers.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and Daniels didn't want to do that.
One of my favourite lines from the show is Duke in the Stats, which obviously Daniels is not into, and I love it so much because no matter where it is, it goes on in life, and I think this is the thing. And
yes, I see it even in my business here.
This is the thing. Yeah. No matter where you are, you can still say Duke in the Stats. It's just said a different way. I think that's the thing of it.
Yeah.
But by the end, Daniels is the only one who's kind of happy by the end of the show, and it's kind of a rarity because he's quit the force and now he's a criminal defence lawyer, and it seems strange for a character to go through all of that with such a political and obviously race-related show. I mean, was you surprised that that's how it was going to finish?
I knew that he was going to be, and I don't know how much I can say because I don't want to give away for people who haven't seen the show, so I don't know how much it's okay for me to say. I know it's been 6 years since the show ended, so maybe it's okay to say anything, but or 5 years. But I knew, David told me in that lunch when we were shooting the pilot that he was going to be moving toward becoming police commissioner by the end of the 5th season. I didn't know that he would be a commissioner for an episode and a half. At the very end. And then quit.
One other thing that I've got to mention as well is one thing that shocked me was Cedric Daniels, the ladies' man. I mean, were you surprised by this? Because when it happened, I kind of thought, wow, he's quite a smooth talker here.
I didn't. It's funny. The first person who said that to me was Ed Burns. And it was somewhere around the middle of the second season. He made a comment about my character's appeal to women. And I said, what? Daniels? I was shocked. I was shocked. I wasn't aware of it. I mean, McNulty I got, Stringer Bell I got, the whole world got Stringer. So I was like, and he said, yeah, and I just didn't know what to think of it. And so, I still don't know what to think of it.
So did people come up to you with posters of you? Had you become that pinup then?
I don't think I ever became a pinup. I mean, once again, I never, in terms of kind of that sex symbol thing, I mean, the only person who really went was Idris. I mean, I remember, I don't mean to digress too much, but I remember, I wasn't there, but I remember in the middle of the second season, half the cast, it was either the second season or the third season, we took a week off, and half the cast went to the New Orleans Music Festival, the Essence Music Festival, and half the leads went to the HBO Black Film Festival in Miami, and I was with the half that went to Miami, and so it was me, Sonia, and Clark Peters went down to Miami, and Dominic and Wendell and Idris went to New Orleans, and what happened to Idris? I mean, there were women showed up with signs, the Stringer Bellers, they call themselves. And it was like he got mobbed. Like it reached the point where he had to be taken in the back way whenever he wanted to get to the hotel. Somebody like broke into his hotel room and was doing, and that was a guy, it wasn't even a woman. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. Yeah. For me, it was more things like, and I found this more like, it's interesting. I would be out with my girlfriend at the time when I first moved to Los Angeles in between the third and the fourth seasons. And that's when I started noticing women coming up to me and just being kind of crazy. Really coming on to me. I mean, it's like my girlfriend would go to the bathroom and she'd come back and some woman would be hitting on me. So that was kind of weird.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff doesn't happen so much anymore. Yeah, this was like 7 or 8 years ago, but yeah. Actually, this was like 10 years ago, but yeah. So that was a little weird. But like I said, it was nothing compared to Idris.
Yeah, well, I mean, this guy is, a Hollywood A-lister, but even then, as you said, I mean, it was Beatles mania, basically, wasn't it?
For him, it was, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, the women.
The show itself took its time finding its audience. It had its core audience, but it took its time expanding out of that. Was you worried about it ever finding this bigger audience to, think it's doing its job?
Well, I was surprised because we knew how good the show was. I mean, from finishing up the pilot and by the end of the first season, for the most part, we knew, man, we were the shit. I mean, we just knew we did. We all knew, man, we were the shit. We were waiting for those Emmy nominations to come in. I was, you know what I mean? And then it was like the silence was deafening. I was like, what the fuck is this? Excuse me. What the hell is this? And I was like, okay, second season. And then third season, I was like, wait a second. This is crazy. Something's not right here. And that's, when I really started to, that was when it really started to dawn on me some of the kind of racial politics of Hollywood. Because for me personally, I didn't see any other explanation. Not even to get a nomination for Best Series or Best Acting Ensemble. I just thought we're talking Golden Globes, Emmys, SAG Awards, nothing. It's like we literally didn't exist. And we were surrounded by other HBO shows that were being we were on at the same time as Sex and the City and The Sopranos and 6 Feet Under, and those shows were being showered with nominations. So I guess I just didn't know what to think. But by the same token, season after season, we all still knew that, we were the best show on television. I mean, maybe I shouldn't put it that way, but we all felt like we were the best show on television. And so, I was actually, after the track record, I was more shocked the way it turned into this phenomenon at the end of the fifth season. I mean, suddenly it was this deluge and I couldn't walk down the street. From being, from talking to people in Hollywood said, oh yeah, I hear that's a great show, to not being able to walk down the street for about a year. Yeah, so that was wild.
Do you think TV landscape has now opened up because of The Wire and obviously other shows along that? Because you see nominations, obviously Treme started to get nominated as well. I mean, Empire is doing huge numbers now as well. Do you think it's now opened up? People finally seeing these things?
When you say these things, what do you mean?
As you were saying before, there was almost this racial prejudice against the show to a certain degree. And do you think that is the problem?
When I say, to say racial prejudice against the show, I feel like is a little bit of an oversimplification. In other words, I don't think that it's like we don't want to nominate them because we're black, but I think it was this like subconscious thing where powers that be in Hollywood, particularly when so many of the people making decisions are older white men, they would turn and look at it and like, oh, I can't follow this, and it's a bunch of black people running around. I just can't relate. Oh, click. You know what I mean? Because when people keep saying they don't have time to watch the show, and yet they're finding time to watch every other show on HBO, and they're saying, well, it's too complicated. But Downton Abbey is getting nominations off the first season. I'm like, come on. And I think Empire, honestly, it's really interesting. I don't know how much The Wire changed that. I mean, I feel like The Wire was the beginning of a dialogue about that. You know what I mean? That people want to see good stories. They don't care what color people are. especially given the phenomenon that The Wire has become in Western Europe and in Scandinavia. I mean, people in Norway and Sweden and Finland and France and Britain they're just going crazy over The Wire, in Germany. But now Empire is this whole other thing. I feel like Lee Daniels is a wizard. The way he's able to, and I feel like he even started really with, oh my God, why can't I think of her name? One of the biggest producers in Hollywood, who created Grey's Anatomy and Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder, Shonda Rhimes. I feel like she started. She started the conversation, and then with Empire, Lee Daniels. It's really slick, and I hesitate to say this because I don't want to get in trouble, but I feel like I have to say it. On the one hand, he did something that he used kind of tropes and stereotypes that Hollywood's very comfortable with by doing hip hop and gangsterism. Oh, well, they can accept us this way. On the other hand, what he's really doing is Dallas and Dynasty. You know what I mean? He's doing a big black soap opera, and people don't care what color people are. They love that. They love those stories. They love those characters. Yeah. And so, and the numbers are, because it's a network, when in the history of American network television have you seen the numbers of a new show get bigger every single week? Yeah. So, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a manager and happens to be black. We were having lunch the other day, and she was saying how the conversation in the casting rooms now is completely turning around. Everything black seems to be beautiful. So we'll see how that continues. We'll see.
Well, just stepping away from The Wire for a little bit and talking about roles that you've done since, you were in Lost and you were in Fringe as well, big parts of Fringe, both J.J. Abrams projects. Did you naturally gravitate towards his material because he is, so in depth in this stuff? How did you find it?
Honestly, and this is something that was starting to happen as we were shooting the 5th season of The Wire. Producers and writers in Hollywood were becoming huge fans of The Wire. So, I remember I went on my first, I hadn't been in a pilot audition. Well, no, I had been, because there was a question about whether or not we were going to, be picked up for after the 3rd season. So, I went on a couple of pilot auditions in second position between 3rd and 4th season of The Wire. But it wasn't until the 5th season when we knew the show was ending that I started going on, pilot auditions at the end, during that time. And I remember the first pilot audition I went on, and, remember I had 2 pilot auditions in 5 years. So I was nervous. And so I walked into the room, and it was a great show. It was a great pilot that actually never got picked up. But I said to the writer, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm nervous." He said, "Well, don't be. You're my favorite actor on my favorite show, so you don't have to worry about it." And then he said something that was really interesting. He said, "If you talk to 10 writers in this town, 9 out of 10 writers are going to say The Wire is their favorite show." And the way Lost came up, I'd never seen the show. They offered it to me. Because the producers were fans of the show. And when I spoke to Carlton Cuse after I'd gotten the role, when we were still in the middle of shooting the last episode of The Wire, he talked about our show and how what they were doing and kind of comparing and Lost and what they were doing. And he talked about the role and where they saw the role going. So, and then honestly, I just think I got Fringe because of Lost.
So, J.J. Abrams must be a fan. So the next question is, did you ever get a little word about maybe turning up in a Star Wars film?
No. I don't... No. But that's okay. I've been doing lots of other stuff. Yeah.
Well, you were saying lots of other stuff, next thing, comedy. You turn up in these things and just... Every time I see you, I'm reminded about how deadpan your comedy delivery is. It's, for me, obviously being here in England, it reminds me of British sarcasm. It's so deadpan. Do you love just doing comedy and just going for it?
Well, wait a second. It's funny you say that, because I guess I think of like when I think of what I did on It's Always Sunny and what I think I did in that Funny or Die skit and what I did in the Key and Peele skit. I guess to me they're all such completely different characters, but I never thought of it as deadpan. I'm just being the character and trying to be real. See, because the thing about it is, my training is in the theater, so I'm not a stand-up comedian and I'm not a sketch comedy guy. So I'm not going to be able to compete with those guys that way. But what I can do is just really be the character. Do you know what I mean? The way you would in, say, a Shakespeare comedy or Moliere or Neil Simon. Do you know what I mean? Where it's just about kind of being real in the circumstances and taking the character all the way. So I love doing comedy. I want to do more of it. Yeah.
Well, moving away from comedy and then into action. Now, every time I end up at the cinema, you seem to be in a film with a gun, being a total badass. Is it really cool to be running around just being that total badass?
Well, it's so funny because, now that I'm getting older and, I'm feeling my knees and I'm feeling my back, now they want me to run around shooting guns and fighting? Holy mackerel, what the heck? It's just so funny. I mean, I remember when we were shooting The Guest, I had to train for a month before we started shooting to make sure I didn't hurt myself. It's funny, I just finished shooting something for I can't get into details about it, but it's a project for Microsoft that's an Xbox exclusive. That's a new hybrid form of entertainment. I think we're going to be the first to be doing it. Where it's kind of a TV show that's linked to a video game, and it is 4 episodes. And if it's a hit, there'll be another season. But in that I get to do some action. And I just remember. I remember when we were shooting, I'm like, I'm in shape. And I remember one day I did something that I shouldn't have done, and I tweaked my back. And of course, it's the week before I have to shoot this action stuff. I'm like, holy mackerel, man, come on. It ended up being fine. I had some body work done, but by the same token, I love it. It's like, because a lot of being an actor for a guy goes back to when you were a kid playing cops and robbers and, being, Western, being a private. I don't know how many times when I was a kid, I pretended I was the detective walking in my office being jumped. And having to fight my way out of the situation.
So you've been really practicing for these action man roles, since you were a small boy.
Since I was about 4 or 5, yeah. Yeah.
Going back to actually talking about your younger days, I don't think many people know that you were a singer originally. You were a singing waiter.
Well, I would say I was a musician. I sang. One of my many jobs when I was a struggling musician was as a singing waiter. I was also delivering newspapers and working as an artist model at the same time. Yeah.
And then a few years ago, you released an album, a jazz album.
Yes.
And, was that just a love project? You just thought, what, I'm going to release it?
No, it started as a songwriting demo because my background growing up and my training in college was I went to conservatory. I thought I was going to be a classical composer. So composition was my major. And then I left music school because I realized that I was in denial and I really wanted to be a rock star. That I didn't want to be a classical composer. And it's ironic because I recently started writing classical music again and I'm really getting into it again. But, and so, after, really stumbling into acting in my late 20s and then realizing really late in life that it was kind of my true calling, as time went on, this thing with music just kind of kept coming back into it just wouldn't leave me alone. And so really it started, like I said, as a songwriting demo and then really just kind of morphed into an album. And then a friend of mine, a colleague of mine who's a television producer, was very good friends with a guy who used to be an executive at Capitol Records. And he was kind of moving into music management. So, I released the album. I did the album kind of on my own as a personal project, and then I hooked up with a manager after I'd done the album, And you know, I haven't written enough songs for a second album, but I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten sidetracked because I'm preoccupied with writing this classical music stuff now. But yeah.
So when you're on set and you're having a bit of downtime, what music do you listen to then?
Oh, I don't really listen to music when I'm on set. I'm usually either reading or, yeah, I'm usually reading. It's funny, I don't listen to, in the past few years, I don't go to the radio. I don't listen to the radio much. I don't listen to a lot of new music. And I've been really remiss that way. Yeah, for somebody who calls himself a musician.
So what sort of music, if you had the time, you know, maybe you're driving in the car or something, pop a CD in, what would you listen to?
I listen to all kinds. I mean, the only thing that I'm not a big fan of is country music. And I feel like that has more to do with me just not knowing it well enough. Do you know what I mean? But I listen to everything. I like a lot of the old 60s and 70s Motown stuff. I mean, Sting is my idol. I mean, I feel like I really learned to write lyrics listening to Sting and Stephen Sondheim. And Sting and Miles Davis, I feel like, have been the biggest musical influences on me as a composer, as a songwriter. Yeah. But I mean, I love rock. I like more really, really old school hip hop, like from the 80s and 90s. Yeah, the new stuff I don't really connect to. I don't really relate to it mostly.
Sure. Final question, and back to The Wire. What's your one abiding memory of that time?
My one abiding memory? Man, there are so many. Well, there are two, and this is kind of a general memory, and it's how much all the actors admired each other. Like, I don't know, just remembering talking to people, talking to other. I've never been in a cast where the actors got together and talked about how good all the other actors were. Never. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I remember Larry Gilliard and I would talk about how incredible Wendell Pierce was. Wendell Pierce would tell me, you know, he complimented me on how good I was. Idris came up to me and said, "Man, you do your thing, man. It's something else." I remember I was in the car with Dominic West one day, and we were doing a scene. It was a night raid, and we had a bunch of time on our hands in between setups. And I was talking about Larry Gilliard, and I said, "I'm mad at Larry," and he said, "Why?" I said, "Because he's better than me." And Dominic said, "Oh, well, Larry's better than all of us." And I was like, "That's not what you're supposed to say. Shit, you should tell us how great I am. Fuck." So and then when we would talk about what Andre Roy was doing with Bubbles, it would be like, "Shit, man, that motherfucker, damn." You know, I mean, it was just on and on and on.
Wow, fantastic. That's the end.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was one other memory. My nude scene with Dee Dee Lovejoy. That's an abiding memory. She was great. And the thing that was so great about it was that she was so cool because I was so nervous. She really went, I mean, you'd think it would be the other way around, but she went out of her way to make me feel comfortable. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lance.
That was my pleasure.